Hello children, welcome to the digital class. Children, let us begin our session with a question. Children, can you tell me the three important things that we need to lead a life? The three important things are food, water and air. Among these children, today we will be talking about water. So children, can you tell me the sources of water? I mean to say, from where do we get the water? Yes, there are various sources of water. That is rain, rivers, wells, tanks, etc. So children, after the scorching heat of the months of April, May and June comes the rainy season. You all love rains, isn't it children? So children, where does this rain goes and fall? Yes, it goes and fall on the land surface. And from the land surface, it will be forming the river, and these rivers will go and join into the oceans. So today, we will be learning about rainfall, rivers and oceans. Children, at the end of this topic, you will be able to differentiate between rivers and oceans. You will be able to name different Indian rivers. You will be able to give reasons for the factors influencing climate. You will be able to explain about the uses of oceans, ocean relief. You will be able to explain about the waves, currents, tides. And you will be able to explain about the various rivers and the rivers as a resources and floods. Children, it has been raining on earth for thousands of years. Have you ever thought about why the water in the seas and oceans never dries up? And less than 1% of water that reaches the earth is useful to human beings. Can these water meet the necessities of all living beings? To know the answers to all these questions, let us learn about the hydrological cycle. Water is a cyclical renewable resource. It can be used and reused. Water goes through a cycle from oceans to land and then from land to the oceans. The water cycle has been going on for billions of years and all the life on earth depends on it. Hydrological cycle is the circulation of water in different forms, that is solid, liquid and gaseous. It also refers to the continuous exchange of water between the oceans, atmosphere, land surface, subsurface and all the living organisms. And this hydrological cycle is expressed as RF is equals to RO plus ET, where RF stands for rainfall, which includes the precipitation, RO is runoff and ET is evapotranspiration. Now children, let us learn about the water cycle. The process of water evaporating from the seas, forming clouds in the sky, coming down as rain, flowing down the slopes of land in the form of rivers and finally joining the sea is called as a water cycle. There are 6 stages in the water cycle. They are evaporation, transportation, condensation, precipitation, runoff and the groundwater. Now let us learn about these stages in detail. I will begin with evaporation. The story of rain begins with water vapor. What is water vapor? When you dry your wet clothes in the open, you see that the water disappears after a while and the clothes will dry. Similarly, if you keep some water in a plate, it dries up in couple of days. Actually, water in the clothes or in the plate becomes water vapor and mixes with the air through a process called as a evaporation. So, evaporation is changing of water into the water vapor. The process of changing water into water vapor is known as evaporation. There are several water bodies on the earth's surface like oceans, rivers, lakes, etc. And there is a constant evaporation of water from these water bodies. The process of evaporation speeds up with the increase in temperature. Now let us learn about the next stage, that is transportation. The movement of water through the atmosphere, specifically from over the ocean to over land in the form of clouds, is called transportation. Clouds are propelled from one place to another by either upper air circulation, surface based circulations like land and sea breezes, or other mechanisms. Now let us learn about the formation of clouds. When there is rise in temperature, water vapor rises and reaches up in the sky and it gets cooled. This is because the atmosphere gets cooler as we rise above the surface of the earth. With the cooling, water vapor is transformed into tiny droplets of water, and these droplets gather around minute dust or smoke particles in the air and gradually increase in size. These small drops of water gather to form the clouds. In simple words, we say that the clouds are the tiny droplets of water hanging in the air above. Now children, you will be wondering where most clouds are formed. Since evaporation takes place all over the earth's surface, clouds are also being formed all over. However, it is on the surface of the oceans that maximum evaporation and cloud formation takes place. After all, oceans are the vast water bodies extending up to thousands of kilometers. As a result, it also rains very heavily on the oceans. And the clouds travel inland for thousands of kilometers to bring rain to us. So children, whenever you receive the rain, you don't think that the clouds are formed above you. It has travelled thousands of kilometers, it has come from some other place and it has started raining in your place. Now let us learn about the next stage, that is condensation. The process in which water vapor changes into water is called evaporation. The transported water vapor eventually condenses and forming tiny droplets of water and clouds. The primary mechanism for transporting water from the atmosphere to the surface of earth is called precipitation. When the clouds meet cool air over land, precipitation in the form of rain, dew, mist, fog, rain, hail and snow reaches the land surface. Now let us learn about the formation of rain. As the clouds continue to rise upwards, it gets cooler and more droplets are formed. The droplets come together to form bigger drops. As they get heavier, it gets more and more difficult for them to remain in the air, and so they began to fall as raindrops. Now let us see what happens after the raindrops falls down. It is called as a runoff. Most of the water which returns to land flows down the hills as runoff. The river flow returns to the ocean where it evaporates. Now children, this is about the water which falls on the slopy surface. Now let us learn about the water which falls on the flat surface. The water which falls on the flat surface goes under the ground, and that is called as a groundwater. Under special circumstances, groundwater can even flow upward in artesian wells. That is, you will be knowing about the bore wells from where we extract the water for our daily uses, and the artesian wells, that is the wells which were in the olden days for extracting the water. I am talking about those wells. And the flow of the groundwater is much slower than that of the runoff. That is, the water which is flowing from the higher surface will be little faster, and the water which is flowing under the ground will be slower. Now children, as the water flows from the higher surface to the lower, and as the heat moves from the warmer objects to the cooler objects. Similarly, the air also flows from the higher pressure belt to the lower pressure belt. And this movement of air is called as a wind. And this wind plays an important role in the transportation of the clouds. There are some winds which blows from Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, and they play a very important role in the transportation of clouds. And these winds are called as monsoon winds. The other name given to these monsoon winds are southwest winds, because these winds are blowing in that direction, so these winds are called as a southwest monsoon winds. Now let us learn about humidity. The amount of invisible water vapor present in the atmosphere is known as humidity. When temperature and humidity rise, we feel uncomfortable. We perspire and sweat does not evaporate quickly. We feel sticky and such a weather is called sultry. Now children, this was all about rainfall. Now let us see what happens after the rain falls on the ground. Water falls in the small streams from the mountain slopes during the rainy season. However, these streams dry up after some times. Nevertheless, water also cuts the channels onto the mountains and they flow down in the form of the rivers. This is how the rivers are formed. When it rains, the water flows down the same channels. In this way, river courses and river valleys are formed. Now let us learn about the transformation of a stream into broad river. At its source, a river usually starts in the form of a thin stream. As it flows further, it gets bigger and broader. This happens because many small streams join it as the stream flows. Smaller rivers or streams which join a large river are called tributaries. As the river becomes bigger and broader, its flow gets slower. It starts depositing the silt and sand it has carried on its bed and banks. These causes the formation of plains. This is how the plains are formed. And regarding these plains, children, you have learned in your earlier classes. Now children, let us learn about the floodplains. A river does not contain the same amount of water all year round. While the river is full during the rainy season, it usually shrinks during the dry season. The river trough is very wide and it has high banks. This valley is filled with sand and gravel, and the river flows in a small stream amidst them. There are no trees here. This is because every year when it rains heavily, the valley is filled with water, allowing no permanent trees or plants to grow here. And this treeless bed is called the floodplain of the river. And all the major rivers have their floodplain. Now this is about the floodplains which is there near the rivers. Now children, when it rains heavily, the water will cross the river and it will come into the human habitation, and this is called as a flood. Flood is the accumulation of the large amounts of water. Floods have become a major problem in India in recent years. Some or the other part is flooded every year during the rainy season, and these causes severe damage to people, crops and livestock. So this was all about rivers. Children, where do the river go and join? Yes, it goes and join into the ocean. Now children, let us learn about the rivers as a resource. River water are an important surface water source for homes, that is for our day-to-day activities, for agriculture, that is for irrigation and animal husbandry, and for industry, that is for making water and energy production. And in addition to this, rivers also provide a number of ecosystem services. Now children, after learning about the rivers, where do these rivers go and join? Yes, it goes and join into the oceans. So now let us learn about oceans. As you all know children, the earth is known as a watery planet. About 71% of the earth's surface is covered by oceans and seas. An extension of saline water on earth is called sea, and the large sea areas are called oceans. Oceans are huge bodies of water generally separated by continents. So children, on the planet Earth, we have oceans and continents, but now I will be telling you about the 5 important oceans. That is the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean or the Antarctic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean. Now let us learn about each ocean. We will begin with the Pacific Ocean, which is called as the biggest ocean. The Pacific Ocean separates Asia and Oceania from the Americas. The Atlantic Ocean separates the America from Europe and Africa. The Indian Ocean washes upon Southern Asia and separates Africa and Australia. The Antarctic Ocean or the Southern Ocean, sometimes considered as an extension of the Pacific, Atlantic and Indian Ocean, which encircles Antarctica. And last comes the Arctic Ocean. It is sometimes considered as a sea of the Atlantic, which covers much of the Arctic and washes upon the North America and Eurasia. These Antarctica and Arctic Ocean are now called as the frozen ocean children, because the sun rays reaches slanting towards the poles. These two poles has totally frozen into the ice, and that is the reason these Arctic Ocean and Antarctic Ocean is also frozen into the ice. Now children, as you find the different relief features on the land surface in the form of the plain, plateaus and mountains, similarly the floor of the ocean is just like the surface of the earth. That is, the bottom of the sea is not a flat surface, and even you will find the mountains, plateaus and trenches on the ocean floor. And some of these trenches are so deep that even the total Mount Everest will go and drown into the trench. And this sea floor is extended up to 3 to 6 kilometers. And there are the different parts of the ocean floor. Now let us learn about them. The ocean floor is divided into 4 parts. The first one is continental shelf, continental slope, deep sea plains or the abyssal plains, and the oceanic deeps or the trenches. As you all know children, the water will never remain still. It keeps moving. So now let us learn about the movements of the ocean. The first movement of the ocean is waves. When the water on the surface of the ocean rise and falls, they are called as waves. Waves are formed when gentle winds scrape across the ocean surface. The faster the wind, the bigger will be the waves. Now let us learn about the another movement, that is the currents. In the ocean, water moves from one part to another part in big streams. And these streams, which flow constantly in a definite direction on the surface of the ocean, are called as ocean currents. The ocean currents are of the 2 types, that is the warm currents and the cold currents. The warm currents are the one which moves from the equator towards the poles, and the cold currents are the one which moves from the poles to the equator. Now let us learn about the next movement of water, that is tides. Tides are the rhythmic rise and fall in the level of the water in the oceans every day. All places on the coast experience some hours of low tide and some hours of high tide. Tides do not rise to the same height every day. When the tide is high, water comes up to the coast for some distance, and when the tides are low, the water moves back from the land. And these tides are very much helpful for fishing purpose. Now children, let us learn about the ocean as a resource. Most life on earth is under the water. Human beings still have not finished identifying all different forms of life in the oceans. Human beings have depended on oceans for their food and livelihood from the ancient times. Oceans provided abundant food resources like fish and salt. We also use the sand, gravel, etc. for our industries or housing. Humans extract minerals like fluorine, iodine from it. Ocean waves are useful for generating power, and ocean floor is mined for oils. Oceans also provide us with gems and pearls. For centuries, we have created our civilization on its shores and traded across with each other traveling on them. Though ocean is very useful and it is very important source, children, it has become the victim of our exploitation. Many big ocean animals like whales and sharks have become extinct. They do not exist anymore. And we have made oceans as a dump yard for dumping the plastic items and for other toxic waste. So children, as a human being, we have to feel responsible and we have to save these oceans. So I hope the topic is very much clear to you. Now let us have a quick recapitulation of what all we learned today. Children, today we learnt about the sources of water, rainfall, water cycle and stages in the water cycle. We learnt about the formation of clouds and rainfall and the results of excessive rainfall, that is floods. We learnt about rivers as a resource, and we learnt about ocean, relief features of the oceans, movements of ocean and ocean as a resource. So based upon our today's session, children, here comes your assignment. I am going to give you some questions. Please note down the questions in your notebooks. You have to differentiate between rivers and oceans. You have to name different Indian rivers. You have to give reasons for the factors influencing climate. You have to explain about the uses of ocean and ocean relief. You have to explain about the waves, currents, tides. And you have to explain about the various rivers, rivers as resources and floods. In addition to this, children, you have to solve the worksheets which are published by 𝗧𝗧 and you can procure these worksheets from the official website of 𝗧𝗧. So children, I hope you all understood the topic very well. With this, I take your leave. Keep learning. Thank you.
ముఖ్యమైన సలహా సూచన ఏంటంటే ఏ రిక్రూట్మెంట్ ప్రక్రియలో కూడా